Okay, guys, let's talk about architecture. Here we go. So some of the world's oldest surviving structures are these dolmens that are in the Golan Heights in Syria. They are close to the border between Syria and Israel. They're constructed from huge boulders. Some are set upright, and then they use another stone as the roof. They would create a space about large enough to serve as a tomb. And you can find dolmens in lots of different other parts of the world, including France, Jordan, India, and Korea. And some of those have various functions. They all share this same construction technique, and they have similar appearance. So this chapter 14 about architecture, and this week we are going to be talking about these different traditional methods and materials: dry masonry, post and beam, round arch and vault, dome, pointed arch and vault, and wooden frameworks. So we'll start with dry masonry. This is probably the simplest building technique. It just means that you are piling stones on top of one another in a consistent pattern. And in dry masonry, no mortar is used. So, when you see a brick home in your neighborhood, it probably has mortar in between those bricks, but in dry masonry, it's not used. And then also another term to know is it is called dressed if the stones are cut and shaped before they're used. So they're not just found in their natural shape. They'll actually cut them and shape them before they use them. And if they do that, that's called dressed. The next type of construction that we're going to talk about is called post and beam. And much of the world's architecture has been built with this kind of construction, which is also sometimes called post and lintel. You can see these in Egyptian temples. An important term that you need to know is that a colonnade is a row of columns that are connected by beams. And then, although we saw them first in Egyptian temples, the Greeks refined this process. And for more than 2,000 years, the Parthenon in Greece and other classical Greek architecture has influenced designers of a lot of later buildings. So here's a picture of the colonnade and court of Amenhotep III. It's a really beautiful photo. The next type of construction is called round arch and vault. And these arches would be supported by either a column or a pier. And a pier is just a massive column. A barrel vault is when an arch is extended in depth, kind of looks almost like a hallway that is shaped with an arch. You can see that uh, in 14.6, image 14.6 in chapter 14. And then a groin vault is the intersection of two barrel vaults, and that is 14.7. A couple of other notable terms that you'll need to know is that a keystone is the final stone that is placed at the top of an arch. And when that keystone is placed, a continuous arch with load bearing capacity is created, and then they can remove wood supports that they used at the beginning. And then the other term you need to know is arcade is a series of arches that are supported by columns. So you can see in this image here that that is an arcade because it is a series of arches supported by columns. Okay. The next type of construction that we want to talk about is a dome. And when we think about a dome, it's basically an arch that has been rotated 180 degrees. So it goes all the way around. And these images here are of one of the most famous domes, one of the most magnificent domes in the world that was designed for the Byzantine Cathedral of Hagia Sophia, which means Holy Wisdom in Istanbul, and it was built in the 6th century. Then we are moving into our next construction technique or type, which is called pointed arch and vault. So after the round arch, the pointed arch was the next most important structural advance in the Western world. Um, the new shape, it kind of seems like a small change. Like, why do we have a separate section for this? But it had a huge effect on the building of cathedrals because it made it possible to make much wider aisles and much higher ceilings. So we'll start to see that um, in places like the Notre Dame in France. There's an image there. So a couple of things that we need to know with the arch and vault are that buttresses are used to support the outer walls. And in Gothic cathedrals, they used these things called flying buttresses, in which the force of the arch vault is carried to a larger buttress that is outside of the cathedral or of the building. So, and there's an image that you can look at to reference. It's 14.14 in your text. So then we move on to wooden frameworks. Just a couple of terms that you'll need to know here. A truss is a triangular framework that is used to span or support. It sort of looks like zigzags. And then the other one that you'll want to know is a balloon frame is just where heavy timbers have been replaced with much thinner studs, and that makes it possible um, to build things much quicker. You could use plasterboard instead of things that cost a lot and take a lot longer. We have a couple of modern materials and methods, cast iron and steel and reinforced concrete. So when we're talking about cast iron, it has much greater strength than stone or wood, and it can go much longer distances. You can have a long piece of iron. Um, there is an architect named Joseph Paxton who designed this building in London called the Crystal Palace, and he used lightweight factory-made modules of cast iron with glass, and he was able to make um, this whole building, uh, where it was made with glass, so that it was much more beautiful and you're able to get a lot more light into the building. Unfortunately, the building showed the great defect of early cast iron buildings that these unprotected metal struts, they will buckle if they're exposed to extreme heat. So in 1936, a fire broke out and the Crystal Palace burned to the ground. So you won't find any modern photos. That's why we have a drawing here. Okay, when we talk about steel, there are a couple of things that you'll need to know. So steel was developed between 1890 and 1910, and they use steel to reinforce concrete. And with the invention of steel, that led to uh, being able to make these skyscrapers. So among one of the first skyscrapers that survives in good condition is this image on the right called the Wainwright Building, and it's in St. Louis, Missouri. It you can also read a little bit about it on page 228 in your book. The other image that is there in your slides is by a Swiss-French architect named Le Corbusier. I am not very good with French, but Le Corbusier. And this is the domino construction system. It's a drawing of it, but basically the reason that you need to know about this is that he was able to use these steel columns and reinforced concrete slabs in this system that he called the domino construction system, so that the these columns would support the floors instead of walls supporting the floors. It made it possible for people to move the placement of the interior walls a lot easier. Well, I can't change slides. Hang on. There we go. Okay. Then we are going to talk about some recent innovations, and your text will go a lot more in depth, but there are a few that I wanted to point out. The Denver International Airport has these giant tents that are about 15 acres of woven fiberglass. It makes it one of the largest suspension buildings on Earth, which is kind of interesting. And then the image here of the Guggenheim Museum in Spain, it's almost so beautiful that it's like it's functional sculpture. So that is one that I wanted to point out. Then we have some construction that is happening with carbon fiber structure, which is really interesting, sorry. And then a new material called CLT, cross-laminated timber. And CLT, it uses wood in a new way because it laminates the slabs of wood with their own grains at an angle. It makes this wood as strong as concrete, but it is much lighter than concrete. So they're able to do some different things with that. And then I think this is our last slide. Talking about building green, so being more environmentally friendly with our buildings. There is a council called the Green Building Council, and they make annual awards for leadership in energy and environmental design. And so it's LEED awards, and they will present certified silver, gold, and platinum awards each year to projects that reach designated point levels. And that is it for architecture. So I will talk to you guys next week when we start our art history chapters. Bye, guys.